Welcome to the Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and this is Where Characters Gather. It is Memorial Day, and like I said last week, I hope we all take a moment to stop and reflect that our freedoms are far from free, and there are grieving families, and we should take a moment from our day off and barbecues and all of that stuff to say a prayer and be grateful that there are those that are willing to sacrifice it all so that we have the freedoms that we have. It doesn't come without a price. So, okay. What did I read last week? It was a very slow week, and it had to be, and I will explain why. So, finished 2 books. So, first up would be The Two Towers by Tolkien, and this is the second book of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. Much like I said when I finished the first book, it suffers from being a very familiar story, and it feels constantly like I'm rereading it, and there's nothing to discover, and there's nothing awaiting me that I didn't know, even surface level knowledge, which is what I admittedly have of the story. And I can't seem to lose myself in the story. Now, I did enjoy the appearance of Treebeard. I did enjoy all of that. But overall, it is a very good book. But it is just so familiar. It's just so familiar that I feel like, and this makes no sense because I've never actually read it, it feels like I'm talking to an old friend and I can anticipate everything they're going to say. And I get bored. That's the truth of it. I will finish Return of the King, but yeah, I'm bored. That's the truth. I'm bored. Okay. So, I only finished one other book this week. I had to read this book in small chunks to begin with, and then I powered through. No, that makes it sound like it was a bad book, and like I forced myself to finish it just so I could say I finished it. But it's not the case. This is probably going to be my book of the year. I say that with 6 months of reading remaining. And it wasn't because I enjoyed the book. It's because of the impact the book had on me personally. And it isn't a period of history that is written about from a historical fiction perspective. We tend to gloss over it. So the book is Miss Graham's Cold War Cookbook by Celia Rees. This is historical fiction. It takes place in post-war Germany as the Cold War is beginning to become a thing. So, the premise is late 1945 England. Edith is a school teacher. She is a spinster, and she is taking care of her invalid mother while her siblings have lives. Families, husbands, children, lives. She wants a change. So she applies to the Control Commission to work for the education department and set up schools in post-war Germany. She is accepted, and she departs the first week of January 1946. That is the setup. She is recruited to spy, to find a Nazi officer she knew pre-war if she happens to stumble across him. So she's got 2 missions. She goes to Germany. And thus begins the hardest read of my life. I don't say that lightly. I have read difficult books. I have read, gut punch books. I have read, the gambit. And yet, this is the most difficult read of my life. The scenes of devastation wrought on German cities and in English cities, while necessary to win the war, have aftermath. And we always gloss over the aftermath. And that aftermath was devastating. You had displaced persons, as they were called, refugees from Eastern Europe, streaming westward, trying to escape Stalin. You had bombed out German cities with no resources, no food, no housing, inadequate shelter, inadequate clothing. You had Nazi officers, sympathizers, wives hiding amongst the populace, trying to escape prosecution in Nuremberg and or be picked up by a Western intelligence source to have the record scrubbed clean and serve one of the former Allied powers. You had Jewish people who survived concentration camps, and you had Jewish military personnel from Allied countries who are back in Germany for other reasons. And all of this is described in the book, and you can only read so much at a time. There is only so much devastating heartbreak you can read before you have to set it aside and go hug someone you love. And I say that because I think this is a book everyone should read. It is relevant to today. It is one of those lessons from history that we don't learn, and yet it's one that we need to learn, more so now than ever. And there are twists in the story that will gut punch you and just shatter your heart into a billion little shards of glass that you have to then stop and take a break and reconstruct. The last 30 pages, there was a twist I didn't see coming. I spent the next 5 minutes asking the book, what just happened? I literally spent 5 minutes asking the book what happened. This book, as I said in my blog post, which I did write before I released this video, and it's published, I don't think this is a book you should read alone like I did. Find somebody to buddy read it with. Find a book club to buddy read it with. Or at least have someone available who you know has read it that is willing to talk about it, so that when things happen and when your heart feels broken and you're frustrated and incensed, you have someone to talk to without ruining the book. I read it by myself, and Dave kept asking me over the weekend if I was okay and if the book was done yet, because I was not okay. The dogs knew I wasn't okay, and they would just come pile on me while I was reading to offer some comfort. This book needs to be read with someone else. If you are interested in reading this book, you don't have anybody else who's read it, you can always slip in my DMs and Instagram, and I will be willing to talk to you and, discuss. I can't divulge what happens in the book because it will spoil it. And the last thing I want to do is spoil this book. It is an amazing read. Even more amazing because this is her first adult novel. The author usually writes young adult fiction. This is not young adult fiction. In no sense is this young adult fiction. It is a book that will stick with me forever. It's going to stay on my shelves. It is one I will always recommend. It is one that I think is a very important read. And it's very fitting that I talk about this book on Memorial Day. Yeah. So, I highly recommend Miss Graham's Cold War Cookbook. And there's a slight caveat here. If you think you don't like espionage stories and you are worried that that's going to taint the read, the espionage is not like other espionage stories. That's the most I can say without ruining the book. As you all know, I think World War II is an overused historical fictional period. I don't read, for the most part, World War II books. I do every once in a while. But this is post-war. And we don't talk about post-war. We don't talk about the aftermath. We don't talk about the build-up to the Cold War. We don't talk about the devastation wrought. This book talks about all of that. Talks about things I'm sure a lot of us didn't learn in school, but were absolutely fact. So, yes, I highly recommend this book. Highly recommend this book. Okay, so I finished the book very early Sunday morning, like a little after midnight. I had a book hangover most of Sunday. I did start Spring Fling by Mary Kanders. It's downstairs. I will undoubtedly work on that this week. I don't know what else I'm going to read this week. I'm still in book hangover aftermath. I need something. I'm hoping that Spring Fling does this a little light, some emotional depth that isn't, just a gut punch after a gut punch after a gut punch. So, if not, I will pick up something else and we shall see. So, like, the end of the month is kind of open. What did you guys read last week? Leave a comment down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.